Hi, everyone. It's Matt from The Pen Habit, and I'm doing a re-review today. First, let me start off by pointing out my shirt. That's actually wasn't planned, but it's actually pretty apropos. Um, so, one of the things that no one can say about me is that I don't have an opinion. I'm a very opinionated person. I know that about myself. And I've had some opinions about specific pens over the last year and a half that I've been doing these reviews where people have disagreed with me pretty vehemently. And one of the things I'd like to do over the next couple of years is go back and revisit some of those pens. So one of the ones that I was really disappointed in from the beginning, that I didn't like very much, was the Pilot Falcon. Now, this is a very well-known pen and one that I didn't have a great experience with. So Rob, one of my viewers, recently just sent me another pen. He sent me a couple of pens to review before I shipped them off to him, and one of them he sent another Pilot Falcon, and I wanted a chance to take a look at it. So, a couple of things have changed with the Falcon since the one that I got. Um, Not least of which is now I believe it is known as the Pilot Falcon, not the Namiki Falcon. I believe Pilot has changed that name kind of officially. But that all being said, I want to walk through really quickly through the pen. It hasn't changed a whole lot. And then I want to do a writing sample and talk about how, if at all, my feelings for the pen have changed. So the new version of the Falcon, this is the acrylic version. It comes in rhodium trim now, which it didn't when I bought mine. It's got that braided finish here. It says Pilot Japan. The big difference I noticed was this little metal finial up here. That didn't exist in my earlier version. The cap was all acrylic previously. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. Same pen, same, it feels very well made. The threads are very nice here. It's still cartridge converter and uses either the Con 20 or the Con 50 converters, or Pilot's proprietary cartridges. This is as you can see from this sticker, a soft, fine nib. So that's, not a lot has changed, but other than that, it's still pretty much the same. So let me talk a little bit about the writing experience. On my Falcon, when I got it, I had problems with it from the moment I got it. Hard starts, skips, problems with ink flow, all that kind of stuff. Those were all over the place with my pen. After I did my review several months later, I finally sat down for about an hour, pulled out the pen, and the nib was a mess. Now, I bought my pen at a local store. It's one of those that had been out on display, so I wouldn't be at all surprised if the nib was a mess because it had been out, they had inked it, people had tested, played around with it, and bent the nib out of proportion. It's also possible that I bent the nib out of shape. I don't think that's the case, but it is possible, so I don't want to discount that. This pen came to me brand new, still in the box. I believe it was shipped from Pen Chalet. And the writing experience on this pen was much, much better than the writing experience I had on my earlier Falcon. No hard starts, no skips, no ink flow problems. And that in particular was the thing that surprised me most, because on my old Falcon, even after I did all the work and got it writing pretty well, I still occasionally had ink flow problems, especially if I used the Con 50 converter, which, as I've mentioned before, I don't like. Particularly on this pen, I don't think the Con 50 is the right choice because it's got such a small reservoir for ink, and this pen can put out a lot of ink, especially if you're getting some of the bounce in the nib. I also think that my earlier experience with the Falcon was kind of disappointing for me because I was expecting more flexibility. I was expecting a semi-flex nib, and this really isn't even a semi-flex nib. So when you approach it from that point of view, it has a very nice bounce that I like a lot. My problem is I still don't love the way it fits in my hand. This is a pen that, I can't even explain why I don't like the way it feels in my hand, but this it's hard for me to even have decent looking handwriting with this pen. It's just kind of a mess. Um, and the cap, especially since they put that little metal finial in, it's the balance feels off to me. It's not back heavy by any stretch of the imagination, but it just feels off to me. Um, that being said, it's a little small. If this were just a touch larger, I think I'd like it a little bit more. My other minor concern is, in order to feel like I'm getting a solid bounce, I have to hold it pretty far back on the pen, and my hand sits right on the threads. Now the threads aren't sharp; they're not uncomfortable at all. But it's I wish I could hold it on the grip. I just the angle of approach is not quite right there. But in any case, let me just do a really quick bit of writing with this pen so you can see the difference. This is the Pilot Falcon with the 14 karat gold soft fine nib. The ink is Rohrer and Klingner Alt Goldgrün or Goldgrün. Anyway, and of course, Rhodia dot pad. Now, I didn't prepare a quote for this review, so excuse me for just stealing the good old standard. So it writes pretty well, all things considered. It's because it's a fine nib, it does tend to be, and a Japanese fine at that, it does tend to be just a little on the fine side for my tastes. On occasion, I really do like a very fine nib, and this is a very fine nib. Um, but because I'm so used to medium metallics and obliques and broad and mediums and occasionally broads, the Japanese fines tend to be just a little too, not scratchy but toothy for me. It has nothing to do. The pen is not toothy or even feedbacky. It's just that the point is so much finer than I'm used to that I can feel it in the paper a little bit more than I like to. Um, you can still get some line variation, but not much. And this pen really isn't meant, as I said before, it's not even a semi-flex. So just make sure when you get this pen, and you've read this probably a bazillion times online, but everyone sees the video. And you know what video I'm talking about. It's one of those videos with the Spencerian modification with some amazing calligrapher doing some beautiful calligraphy using a Pilot Falcon. Do not expect that. Do not expect close to that. This is a nice, bouncy nib. And if you try to get much more out of it, I suspect you will largely be disappointed. I mean, you can flex, you can push it a fair bit, and it will put down a fair bit of ink, but that's not what this nib is intended for. And it requires a fair bit of force. And this is a nib where, frankly, I could see it getting sprung. Now, if you're not a flexor, this actually is quite a nice writing experience. And perhaps it was because my nib was so jacked up before that I had ink flow problems. But even with the Con 50 converter, which I've mentioned before I don't like, nothing on this one. So I am forced to withdraw some of my complaints about the Pilot Falcon. It is not as bad a pen in general as I initially thought it was. Some of that had to do with a kind of a dud that I got. I fixed the nib and eventually sold the pen, so I don't even have that pen anymore. That being said, I still probably won't ever buy another one of these. Not because I don't think it's a good writer, but because it's just not the right fit for my hand. And it's a standard black flat top pen. There's nothing flashy about it. A lot of these Japanese pens, especially the daily workhorse pens, they're just not flashy. That's just not what the culture's all about. Unlike the Italian pens where almost all of them are colorful and bright and have unique designs and things like that. This is just a pretty standard looking, very understated, very well made pen but I've got a ton of these, not Falcons specifically, but a ton of this design of pen. So that is my re-review of the Pilot Falcon. If you have any questions, any comments, like I said, I'm not as anti-Falcon as I was before. So I'm sure that doesn't appease everyone, but there you go. Thank you for watching. We will see you here next time on The Pen Habit.